It's an absolute game changer. The ability to swim up to this, which was underwater, and actually come right up and actually look through the window and see where the fish were through my face mask, and actually take the fish through the net, turn my hand over, push against the lid, and then release the fish that would swim into the bucket was an absolute game changer. It was brilliant. Now you could be a fisherman collecting bait, or you could be a reef keeper or an aquarist collecting your own fish from nature. Chances are you will have been frustrated ripping these lids on and off your holding buckets. And I went for a collecting trip down to the Nambucca River to collect some saltwater fish for my Palau reef behind me. Before I went, I decided to make an alteration to my holding bucket, and that is by making a self-closing lid. Previously, when I've been collecting, I wear a weight belt, and in that weight belt, I tuck a mesh bag, the kind of bag that you use to carry your fins and your mask and snorkel around in. In that bag, I carry a bunch of plastic peanut butter jars. Now, as you can imagine, there's a lot of kerfuffling around with the twist top lid on those jars, and needless to say, there's been a number of occasions where I've lost the fish because I've fumbled it and dropped it and it's gone back into the river or the ocean and swum away. You're going to need a bucket. I like to choose a light coloured bucket, or in this case a white bucket, of course with a lid. That way you're going to minimise the amount of heat absorption and the amount of heat that might possibly transfer to the water inside that bucket and stress the fish out. You're going to need a piece of plastic or acrylic. The more rigid the better. The size of it needs to be big enough to fit your hand through. So if you've got a large hand, you're going to need a larger piece of plastic. This is actually 8 inches or 20 centimetres by 5 inches or 12.5 centimetres. And I like it to be clear, that way you can actually see the fish that are inside the bucket when you're transferring the new fish to the bucket. You're going to need a hinge, just one hinge, stainless steel to minimise the amount of rusting, and this is an 85mm hinge. It doesn't matter if it's a fixed pin or loose pin, but in my case, just make sure that the actual hinge is nice and loose. Some of the hinges that you'll find at hardware stores are a bit stiff. This one is nice and loose. Just have a little bit of a play around, make sure it's stainless steel. You're going to need some stainless steel bolts. 5 10mm M6 stainless steel bolts, and these have a button head with a Allen key fixing point on top. So that's 5 10mm and 1 25mm. Some spring washers, 6 stainless steel nuts. So a spanner and an angle key. I just can't see bloody. I can't say Allen key. A spanner and an Allen key in my case, or you might need 2 spanners. You're going to need a texter, Stanley knife, and you're going to need something to act as the stretchy mechanism that actually pulls the lid shut. So some form of elastic or rubber. This is a bungee strap or a knocky strap or whatever you want to call it. It just so happens that the one I bought was big enough to actually have 2 pieces of strap for 2 buckets. It's nice and resistant, UV stable, a little bit thicker, so it's not going to break. You're going to need a drill. Drill bit big enough to fit your M6 bolts. Now I will point out, I'm using M6 bolts because that's the right size to fit through the holes of the hinge. But if you're using a different style of hinge, just make sure the bolts fit accordingly. So the first thing to do is to decide upon the position of your lid. It needs to be pushed far enough across to one side of the bucket to allow you to fit the hinge. How the outline in texture is where I outlined the actual lid, and I pushed it more to that side than to this side to accommodate for the hinge. Use your texter and just draw the outline of the actual clear lid, 1/2 inch or 10 to 12mm in from the outer rectangle. You're going to draw another rectangle, brand new blade. I like to just score the section first rather than trying to cut all the way through in one go, which might actually mean that you're going to slip and hurt yourself. And it's a lot easier to make that cut once you've actually done the shallow cut to start with, and it also guides the blade. Okay, there's our window. The actual clear plastic is larger than the hole, and it's going to go on the inside of the bucket, i.e. the underside of the bucket. You want to make sure you stay far enough away from where the bucket lid seals on the actual bucket itself. So the next thing we're going to do is mark where we're going to actually drill for the holes out for the bolts to bolt the hinge onto the bucket. A couple of things to look for. When you mark the actual position of the bolts for the clear lid, you want to make sure that it's actually clear of the white bucket itself. What I mean by that is when I drill through here and install the bolt into this clear plastic, it's not catching on that part there. You don't want that clear lid to impede on the seal of the actual bucket itself. You can see I've only marked 5 out of the 6 holes. I haven't marked the middle hole, which is on the clear doorway, and that's for a very obvious reason that you'll see later on. Now when you're drilling these plastics, you need to be very careful you don't push too hard and actually inadvertently crack the plastic itself. It's not as resilient as, say, steel or wood, obviously. So you want to make sure that you actually don't do any damage. A little bit of gentle pressure, I find a slightly higher speed, but not pushing too hard is the best way to do it. And again, the reason I've chosen these button style stainless steel bolts is so that the fish won't potentially hurt themselves on any rough edges. So turn that over to the top side. Pop on your spring washer. So spring washers actually have a slit in them, and then they're slightly, I guess, kinked out of position. And what that does, it actually acts as a degree of tension so that when you actually do your nut up, it'll actually hold the nut and that nut won't come loose, which is not what you want when your bucket is underwater with you and full of aquarium fish. Don't go too hard with them because you don't want to crack the plastic. It says here as he prepares to do them up even tighter. Still haven't put any bolt on the middle section there. Turn the lid over and you're going to bolt the clear door to the underside of the bucket lid, again using the M6 10mm bolts. So here is we have our clear door that is hanging down from the inside of the bucket lid. But that's no good because the hole's open. We need to make sure that that lid closes up by itself. So that's where the next part comes in play, and that is the roll of our stretchy rubber. So I'm going to take this hook off of our bungee cord, or our, what do you kind of call it, hockey strap, a tie down strap, and I'm actually going to bolt it to this middle hole, which correlates with the middle hole in the bracket. And that's why I've got one bolt which is actually longer than the others, which is the 25mm bolt. Just so happens that we've got a nice handy hole already in that strap. Now this one's a bit tidier than the one I built for the weekend. This one I built for the weekend, you can see two things. One, the bolts are quite long, it's just what I had lying around the shed, and also the actual spring washers I used just here are starting to show some signs of rust after just being in the water for one time, and that's basically because they weren't stainless steel. I'm not stretching the crap out of it. If you stretch too far and then bolt it, you're going to put a lot of tension on that plastic lid or doorway there, that window. So I just stretched it a little bit, push down, put a dot where you think you want the bolt to go. One self-closing lid. What I did find is my M6 10mm bolt was not long enough to actually do that bolt just there. So I actually had to use a 25mm bolt and just cut it down so that it wouldn't actually hurt my hand when I was putting the fish inside the actual bucket. How easy is that? And I'm telling you now, it's an absolute game changer. What are some applications where you can use this self-closing lid on your collecting bucket? And the first, I guess, is the obvious one. When you go, if you're collecting fish and you're going scuba diving, then you actually leave the bucket as is. You want it to be full of water, you want to sink down to the bottom. Usually you'll have some sort of a rope. You can click a carabiner onto there and maybe a lead weight on the end of the rope so the bucket stays put down the bottom. However, I spend a lot of my time collecting fish in shallow water, and I don't really want to have necessarily the bucket banging around on the bottom of the ocean or the estuary in my way and scaring the fish. So I come up with an idea. What I did to this bucket is just make up a bit of a flotation device out of 50mm PVC fittings, which are basically just 45mm elbows, and I've actually just zip tied it to 4 points around the bucket. And what that actually means is that I can actually tie a rope to this carabiner, tie the rope to my weight belt, and this will actually float on the surface of the ocean behind me. And it's not going to get in the way and scare the fish in those shallow waters. Could also drill a couple of holes just around the underside of the actual float, and that will allow the passage of fresh ocean water in and out. Obviously you don't want to drill them up here because that way the bucket's going to fill up to there and it might actually compromise the flotation ability of your PVC ring. So just do it down there. And of course, when you pull the bucket up out of the water to carry the fish to your vehicle, any residual water will drain out of those holes, but you'll have that much water remaining for your fish to be quite comfortable in. One of the things I also do is do a fair bit of shore collecting, either at night time with a head torch, or sometimes on the freshwater creeks and rivers where I'm spotting for rainbows, or that is rainbow fish. And for anyone who's actually gone collecting rainbow fish, you'll know they like to jump. So if you've got an open lid like this, or if you've got a closed lid and every time with a head torch on, you open the lid to put the new rainbow fish in there, the ones that are in there often jump madly and land up on the gravel and hurt themselves. So by having something like this, where you can actually put the new rainbow fish straight in without having to disturb the lid, will keep the rainbow fish that are inside from jumping out, and you can quite easily put additional rainbow fish in. The other thing is, the other adaptation I was thinking of, is that if you're spending a fair bit of time collecting bait, I think I've heard Americans talk about bluegills, or collecting a freshwater aquarium, say rainbow fish, you are very conscious of the temperature of your bucket getting too hot. And yes, you can do frequent water changes, but one of the things that I could possibly see you doing is drilling a series of holes, again, around the outside of this bucket, tie a rope to it, and you can actually just put that bucket down into the creek or the stream. And again, you'll have the water from the creek and stream changing very slowly through the actual holes and keeping the temperature of the water inside that bucket nice and cool. That way you're not going to have any concerns about the oxygen levels in that bucket depleting too much, and of course the fish dying. I almost forgot. Most people that are trying to collect live bait or live aquarium fish will have in their arsenal of tools some sort of battery air pump. So what I've noticed is that in the past where I've had a sealed lid, I've had to drill a hole just in the actual top of the lid to allow the passing of the air tube and the air stone into the bucket. But in this case here, you can actually just feed that down through the actual lid itself. The actual seal is not enough to stop the passage of air, so you don't have to worry about drilling holes. And you can actually just hook that air pump on your bucket and let it run while you drive home with your prize catch. Thanks guys, I hope that helps. If you've got any questions regarding the construction of this lid, feel free to reach out. I'll see you next time. I'm Adam, Australian Aquarist, and over and out.